Level 1, the infantry volunteer. You're 19. You don't stumble into this. You walk toward it. It's a Tuesday in September. Fort Benning, Georgia. The air smells like red clay and diesel. You signed the papers 3 months ago, right after finishing high school, in a town where the biggest news was the grain elevator fire of 2009. You didn't enlist because you had nowhere else to go. You enlisted because something inside you refused to stay still. Basic combat training is 11 weeks. It breaks most people quietly. Not dramatically, not the way movies show. A guy named Dorsey from Columbus, Ohio, cries into his pillow every night for 2 weeks before requesting a transfer. Nobody mocks him. You all understand. You don't cry. Not because you're stronger, because you're too tired. Wake up is 4:30 a.m. You run before the sun exists. You low crawl through Georgia mud with your rifle pressed against your chest. You eat in 8 minutes. You learn that the army doesn't care about your comfort. It cares about your capability. One evening, your drill sergeant, a lean, hard-jawed man named Staff Sergeant Pruitt, stops in front of your bunk and says nothing for a long moment. Then, you're still here. It's not a compliment. It's an observation. But you take it like a medal. You finish basic. Then advanced individual training. Then you're assigned to the 75th Ranger Regiment out of Fort Moore as a rifleman. You're not Delta Force yet. You're not even close. But you're standing at the bottom of the right mountain, and for the first time in your life, that feels like enough. You spend 14 months in the regiment. You deploy once to eastern Afghanistan, near the Kunar province. Oz night raids. Compounds and villages whose names you'll never pronounce correctly. You run through doorways in the dark with men you trust more than family. You come home with nothing broken on the outside. Some things on the inside are rearranged. You don't talk about it. You train harder instead. One afternoon, a quiet sergeant first class named Harwick approaches you after a live fire exercise. He doesn't introduce himself by rank. He just says, "You've been noticed. There's a selection process. If you think you're ready, I'd stop thinking and start preparing. You're 21 years old. You're not ready. You go anyway." That decision, the one made before you're ready, before the outcome is guaranteed, before anyone is watching, is the first real decision of your life. Everything that follows grows from it. At level 2, the selection candidate. You're 21. You've been preparing for 6 months. It wasn't enough. Delta Force, formerly 1st Special Forces Operational Detachment Delta, was created in 1977 by Colonel Charles Beckwith, a man who trained with the British SAS and came back convinced America needed something it didn't yet have. A classified surgical strike force capable of operating anywhere on Earth with almost no notice and even less support. Selection takes place in the Appalachian Mountains of West Virginia. No one tells you exactly what's coming. That's the point. The first 3 days are land navigation. Solo. Just you, a map, a compass, a rucksack loaded with weight you feel in your spine, and mountains that don't care about your ambition. Fog rolls in before dawn. Your boots are soaked before 6 a.m. There are no clocks. No one tells you your time. You finish a checkpoint and they hand you the next grid coordinate. You don't know if you're passing. You don't know if you're failing. You know nothing except the next checkpoint. This is intentional. Delta Selection isn't looking for the fastest man or the strongest. It's looking for the man who keeps making good decisions when he's been awake for 40 hours, when his feet have blisters inside the blisters, when there's no approval coming and no finish line in sight. It's looking for the man who operates without external validation. On day 6, a candidate named Calloway, a ranger like you, built like a door, decorated twice, sits down at a checkpoint and doesn't get up. Not because he's physically broken. He just decides the math doesn't add up anymore. He walks off the course. You watch him go, and then you pick up your ruck and keep moving. The final event is called the Long Walk. No distance given. No time limit. Just walk, with weight, through mountains, until they tell you to stop. Most candidates don't quit because they're weak. They quit because they're calculating. The moment you start doing math about when this ends, you've already started losing. Pain you can manage. Uncertainty is what breaks people. The body wants a finish line. Delta Selection is specifically designed to deny you one. You stop calculating somewhere around hour 16. You just walk. 3 weeks later, you receive a letter. Of the 19 candidates in your cohort, 4 are invited to the Operators Training course. Most men who attempt Delta Selection never receive this letter. Many try twice. Some try 3 times. You are holding it on your first attempt. You read it twice, fold it carefully, and don't tell anyone. Level 3, the Operator Trainee. You're 22. You survived selection. Now they teach you what you actually have to become. The Operators Training course, OTC, runs approximately 6 months at a facility most Americans will never visit. You will not find it on a public map. It is not labeled. That is not an accident. Marksmanship first. Delta operators are among the most accurate combat shooters on Earth, not range shooters. You learn to shoot while moving, in low light, in a room full of people where only one is a threat and 11 are hostages, and you have less than a second to tell the difference. You fire tens of thousands of rounds. Your hands develop a memory your brain doesn't need to consult. Then, demolitions, breaching, close quarters battle, a language study. You're assigned Pashto because of your deployment history, medical training that goes well beyond combat life-saving. Delta operators often work in places where the nearest trauma surgeon is a 6-hour flight away. You learn to treat a sucking chest wound in the dark with one hand while your team is still in contact. You learn to think like a surgeon with your hands shaking and the clock running. There's also something they teach that no recruiting brochures mention. Because there are no recruiting brochures, they teach you to think independently, critically, under conditions designed to degrade your thinking. A Delta operator is not a weapon pointed by someone else. He is a complete instrument, one who can assess, adapt, and decide when communication is impossible and time has already run out. Near the end of OTC, an instructor named Master Sergeant Okafor tells your group something you'll carry for the rest of your life. Anybody can be brave for 5 minutes. The question is what you do in minute 6 and 7, and in the dark hours of the following morning when no one is watching and nothing is working, and the only reason to keep going is the 4 men beside you who need you to. You graduate on a cold December morning. No ceremony, no parade, a handshake, a unit coin, an assignment. You're 22. You feel like you've aged 10. You don't feel invincible. You feel ready. Those are not the same thing, and you now know the difference. Before we go further, if you've made it this far, comment what you want next. Hit that like button right now and subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. We upload every single day. You're level 4, the tier 1 operator. You're 24. You've been to places the news doesn't cover, on nights that never made the headlines. Delta operates in what the military calls a tier 1 environment. The missions nobody else can do, the places nobody else goes. Your squadron runs 4 to 8 man assault teams, where every man can do every job. When you go through a door at 2 a.m. in northern Iraq, there's no specialist waiting behind you. Everyone is the specialist. In 2011, you're on a direct action mission in the Salah ad-Din province. The target is a mid-level facilitator moving fighters and weapons across the Syrian border. The intelligence window is 6 hours from confirmation to launch. The assault goes clean. 3 minutes. No casualties. You capture the target and 2 associates. In the debrief, you say 40 words. Your team leader says less. The mission doesn't make the news. Nothing you do makes the news. This is what most people misunderstand about Delta Force. The missions that matter are invisible. They happen in a compound in Mosul or a safe house in Djibouti, and they prevent things rather than avenge them. Prevention doesn't trend. Silence doesn't make headlines. But the world is occasionally safer because of a night you'll never describe to anyone outside this building. You deploy 4 times in 3 years. Somalia, Iraq twice. A classified mission in West Africa, whose details remain protected. You lose a teammate named Specialist Reyes on the 2nd Iraq deployment, not in combat, in a vehicle accident on the way back from a link-up. A random thing. A terrible, ordinary thing in the middle of an extraordinary life. Or you attend his funeral in dress uniform. You don't speak. There's nothing to say that would be adequate, so you say nothing. Back home between deployments, you train. You study. You read military history, tactics, decision-making under stress. You're expected to understand not just how to complete a mission, but why it exists, what the 2nd and 3rd order consequences are. The operators who last longest are not the ones who feel nothing. They're the ones who carry it and move anyway. You don't think of yourself as a hero. Heroes are a story someone else tells about you after. You're just a man trying to be the most capable version of himself in the moments that require it most. Level 5. The team leader. You're 27. People are now following you through the door. As a Delta team leader, you're responsible for 6 lives on every mission. Not abstractly, specifically, completely. Your job is no longer just to execute, it's to think while executing. To hold the map in your head and the door in your hands simultaneously. To know that Kowalski favors his left side under pressure and compensate for it in the assault plan. To know Rivera hasn't slept properly in 4 days and position him where fine motor control matters least. to care about your people enough to be honest with them, and honest enough to sometimes make decisions they hate in the moment and understand only later. Leading Tier 1 operators is unlike any other leadership in the military. These men are not waiting for permission. They are elite, autonomous, experienced professionals who will follow you precisely because you have earned it, and only as long as you continue to earn it. The day you coast, they know. The day you bluff, they know. The day you make a decision based on your own self-preservation rather than mission clarity. Something between you is permanently damaged, and no debrief will repair it. In 2015, a hostage situation. 2 American aid workers held for 11 days in a compound outside Erbil, Kurdistan. Intelligence says the captors moved them at dawn. You have 4 hours. You make the plan. You brief it. You walk your team through every contingency. At 2:17 a.m., you breach the outer wall. At 2:19, you're in the building. At 2:21, both hostages are secured. At 2:24, your team is on the exfil vehicle. One assaulter takes a fragment to the forearm. Non-critical, treated on the bird. The commanding officer calls it textbook. You know it wasn't. Nothing went according to plan in room 2. You improvised 3 times in 40 seconds, and the training held where the plan didn't. That's what leadership actually is, not the plan. The response when the plan fails. You sit alone after the debrief, not celebrating, processing, checking internally for what worked, what didn't, what you'll change. This is the habit that separates good operators from great team leaders. They don't just survive the experience, they extract from it. Level 6, the Troop Sergeant Major. You're 33, you carry 30 men on your shoulders. As Troop Sergeant Major, you are the senior enlisted advisor for the entire troop, the officer's command. You make sure those commands are executable, that the men, the equipment, the training, and the institutional knowledge of 100 combined deployments are aligned when the mission comes. You are the bridge between what commanders envision and what operators will actually encounter. When those two things diverge, and they always diverge, your job is to close the gap without losing either side. One of your hardest responsibilities now is recognizing when a man has peaked and being willing to say it. There's an operator named Whitfield, 12 years in the unit. Outstanding record, multiple Valor Awards. But in recent rotations, his decisions have grown incrementally smaller. Not wrong, just narrower. He's managing risk instead of owning it. You've seen it before. The weight of experience becoming the ceiling rather than the floor. You sit with him one evening over coffee that's been in the pot since morning. You don't dress it up. You're good, Whitfield. You've been good for a long time, but good isn't what we're here for. I need you deciding like it's your first deployment, not your last. Because the man beside you is depending on the version of you that took that mountain in 2008, not the version that's protecting what he built. Whitfield looks at his coffee for a long time. Then he nods. He's one of your best operators for the next 4 years. That's the job at this level. Not tactics, people. You can teach tactics. You cannot manufacture a man willing to be broken open and rebuilt at 33. But you can recognize the ones capable of it and be honest enough to ask. Level 7, the Squadron Commander. You're 38. You wear the rank of Lieutenant Colonel. You are now responsible for a complete Delta Force squadron. You're no longer in every room. You're in every decision. Where your unit deploys, how it trains, what risks it accepts, what risks it doesn't, which mission profiles it rehearses this month, because the intelligence community sees something building 6 months from now. When you were a team leader, you thought in hours. Now you think in months. The assault your team runs tonight was shaped by a budget decision you made 8 months ago about which capability to prioritize in the training cycle. In 2019, your squadron supports a classified operation in northeastern Syria. The mission evolves 4 times in 2 weeks as ground intelligence shifts. Each evolution means rewriting the operational plan, rebriefing troop commanders, and absorbing new risk while explaining that risk clearly to generals who are under political pressure you're deliberately shielded from. The mission executes. No friendly fatalities. You sit in the operations center at 3:40 a.m. as the exfil birds return and feel something quiet move through your chest. Not pride exactly. Gratitude. That 200 people trusted 8 months of decisions, and the decisions held. You call home, but hang up before it rings. It's too late, or too early. You aren't sure which. The hardest part of command at this level is not the missions, it's the silence around them. You will attend funerals and stand straight-backed at gravesites for men you selected, trained, and sent. And you will carry the specific weight of that forever. Not guilt exactly, not doubt, just weight. The irreducible weight of the fact that leadership is not a clean transaction. You take the authority, you take the outcome, you take what the mission costs. The ones who do this job well do not make peace with that weight. They carry it and lead anyway. Level 8, the Delta Force Commander. You're 44. There's one of you. The commanding officer of 1st SFODD is a full colonel, one of the most closely held positions in the United States military. Your photograph doesn't appear in press releases. Your itinerary isn't shared beyond a handful of people. You've been in uniform for 25 years. You know this unit the way a surgeon knows his hands. Your authority is immense. Your visibility is near zero. That is precisely the design. Your phone can ring at 3 a.m. with a voice from the Pentagon asking you to assess feasibility on a mission that isn't yet authorized, in a country you're not officially present in, addressing a threat that hasn't been publicly acknowledged. And you have 4 hours to give a professional assessment that will shape national policy. This is not a hypothetical. This is Tuesday. The work is relentless. The pressure is structural. Not dramatic, not movie-like, but constant. Every decision you make has downstream consequences for the operators who execute it, the intelligence officers who shaped it, and the civilians whose lives are changed by it in ways they'll never know. You're also responsible for something no mission brief covers: the future of the unit. Delta Force is not a title, not a building, not a budget line. It's a culture, standards, expectations, and values that exist because every generation of leadership chose to maintain them rather than erode them. You are responsible for passing that culture forward intact. That responsibility weighs more than the rank. Late one night, a junior analyst asks what the job is really like. You think for a moment. Every decision you make lands on someone younger and braver than you are. You get the authority. They get the ground. That should terrify you slightly, always. The day it stops is the day you've lost what made you useful. He writes it down. You hope he remembers it long after he's forgotten your name. Level 9, the JSOC Commander. You're 50. You now command the entire architecture. Joint Special Operations Command oversees America's most elite units: Delta Force, SEAL Team 6, the 161st Special Operations Aviation Regiment, the 24th Special Tactics Squadron, and several classified units with no public name. As JSOC Commander, a 3-star Lieutenant General position, you are the principal military authority over this entire enterprise. You've held supporting roles at this level before, but command is different. Command means the decision stops with you. There's no one to pass it to. There's no safety net built into the organizational chart. Your organization simultaneously conducts operations on 4 continents. Intelligence staff tracks developing situations in a dozen countries. Operators are deployed, training, recovering, or transitioning. The machinery never stops. There are mornings you walk into the operations center and the board has changed overnight in ways that require you to revise plans approved 18 hours ago. You do it without complaint, because complaint is a form of surprise. And a JSOC commander, surprised by the complexity of the world, hasn't been paying attention. The political dimension is something no training prepares you for. You work with the CIA, the NSA, Foreign Intelligence Services, State Department officials, ambassadors, congressional oversight committees. These relationships are not transactional. They are the infrastructure through which your missions are authorized, resourced, and protected. Damaging one takes years to repair and costs more than any mission was worth. You learn to speak 2 languages simultaneously: the language of operations and the language of institutions. The operators you command speak the first fluently. The politicians who authorize your missions speak only the second. Your job is translation. In 2024, a hostage situation in West Africa threatens to become a diplomatic catastrophe. 3 governments, 2 want direct action, 1 wants negotiation, a 60-hour window before the hostages move. You have 90 minutes to brief the Secretary of Defense and make a recommendation that will either work or define the next 6 months of American policy in the region. You've spent 30 years becoming the man in this room. You give the brief. You make the recommendation. It is accepted. The operation works. 11 people come home. Success at this level is not celebrated. It's catalogued. The only appropriate response to a thing going right is understanding precisely why, so that when the window is tighter and the variables are worse, you still have the answer. Level 10, the veteran. You're 53, you've retired. For the first time in 34 years, no one is waiting for your authorization. The transition is not the relief people imagine. The rhythm of mission, debrief, train, deploy, it disappears. The phone that used to ring at 3 a.m. is silent. You stand in a grocery store on a Wednesday afternoon and feel briefly like a man who has forgotten how to speak the local language. But something else happens too. You begin to see your life clearly, maybe for the first time without the noise of urgency. You were a 19-year-old from a small town who refused to stay still, and you walked into the hardest rooms in the world, not once as a stunt, but as a vocation, year after year, decade after decade, without asking for credit that was never coming anyway. You think about the men you trained, operators who walk through doors you designed plans for. Some lead squadrons now. One is at JSOC. They carry something forward that you passed to them, which was passed to you by Harwick and Okafor and men whose names most people will never know. That is the thing about a life built on craft rather than recognition. The recognition doesn't come. And in this world, it was never supposed to. But the craft remains. It lives in the standards that held, even when holding them was costly, in decisions made correctly when the wrong choice would have been easier and safer for the man making it. In the quiet fact that somewhere right now, in the dark, in a country most people couldn't find on a map, a young operator is making a good decision because someone before him demanded nothing less. You take a position consulting for a defense firm. You write a curriculum for a leadership program at a university. You speak occasionally at veteran organizations, not about the missions, never about the missions, but about what it means to commit to something completely, what it costs, what it quietly gives back. There are mornings you wake at 4:30, the body doesn't forget, and sit on the porch in a quiet that used to feel like absence, and now feels something close to peace. You think about what Okafor said all those years ago in the cold at the end of OTC. Anybody can be brave for 5 minutes. The question is, what you do in minute 6. You spent 34 years answering that question. Not perfectly. Not without loss. Not without nights that left marks that never fully healed. But you answered it honestly, with everything you had, every time it was asked.